Well met, everyone. I am Rich DeLitch, and today I am doing a spotlight on Back to the Sea. This is an adventure for 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. I would first like to mention and thank Laura Armstrong for sending me this. You can download this now, Back to the Sea, this adventure, on DM's Guild for $5, and I believe it's on sale for $5.36. I'll put a link in the description as to where you can find this. Laura sent me this, so thank you so much for that. This is more of a spotlight than it is a review. That's the direction that I'm going with these sort of talk-throughs on various DM's Guild and drive-through RPG products. But as a result, I hope to better inform you as to whether or not this might be something that's a good fit for you and your gaming group. Let's jump into this. We have 11 pages here. It's called Back to the Sea, written by Laura Armstrong, as I said. This is a 5th edition compatible adventure for Dungeons and Dragons for 3 to 5 players between levels 3 and 4. Laura did most of the legwork here. She is the writer. She did all the illustrations and whatnot. She laid it out in GM Binder, so there's a familiarity to it. The maps and the accompanying visuals are things that you can download separately. It's part of the purchase price. So when you buy this, you're going to get all these different download links. You'll get the PDF that you're seeing on screen here. You'll get sort of a printer-friendly, really sort of just word-focused version on it. You'll also get a zip file where you can download the maps. The maps are well drawn, and it's very simple. I mean, with 11 pages here, there's not a lot of moving parts, but the visuals of it is very well done. The layout, as I said, is very familiar. It was laid out in GM Binder. So basically, it's kind of like the back-end code where you can just put in all the your own content, and it'll spit out a very familiar look with that parchment in the background. You've got the titles of the same kind of brownish maroon font. It looks familiar. I'll read this first part to you. A crowded dock teeming with small ships, fishing boats abandoned out on the surface of the water, houses built over the water with tight nooks to tie up their boats. Cramped warehouses piled high with barrels and crates. Rain has been coming down for hours. People dash quickly between cover, pulling cloaks over their heads. The horizon over the water grows darker as the evening sets in. Basically, on some sort of maybe a job board, or perhaps someone tips them off in a bar or a tavern, they are to meet with a scholar by the name of Durston Vanderbilt in an inn called the Squealing Squig. Durston is your adventure hook, if you will. This is the setup for getting the PCs involved in this adventure. Durston tells the party that he's been studying an area which is a couple of days' travel out from the coast. He mentions writing a book, and he hopes that his research will uncover the mystery of the area. He's tried to hire some of the locals to assist him, however, they're superstitious, and they think the area is haunted. He needs a group of reliable adventurers to help retrieve items and escort them back to his research lab. There's a bunch of bullet points that follow that indicate what Durston is offering, 1,000 gold piece in reward, and it just kind of talks through some tips and some things for the DM to think through that will give an indication as to sort of the adventure that the PCs are going to go through. At the very bottom, it says in terms of danger, the folk that have been sent out otherwise have had a close call with a large octopus. Otherwise, there really hasn't been any trouble with the sailors and the adventurers and the captain, those that the PCs will meet up with. And in that, the PCs will meet up with a crew. After a good night's rest, it says, the adventurers set off with Durston to a small ship, and he introduces the modest crew, who all seems to be eager to head out on this adventure as they've sort of stagnated a little too long here at the docks. So that's where the sort of setup is. It doesn't go so far into Ghosts of Saltmarsh. This is not a big seafaring sort of campaign or storyline. As we are looking at 11 pages, we are looking at something that's an adventure. It's kind of a one-shot, something, it may take a couple of sessions, but it's something that can be, run from beginning to end with some resolution very quickly. So I like that approach to it. You're only paying $5 or so for this. You're only getting 11 pages. I like that it doesn't have to derail or focus your campaign or your storyline for a really long time out to sea if that's not your thing. But if you just want a little bit of intrigue, a little bit of investigative work, kind of a haunting ghost story that takes place out on this small sort of land, this island, if you will, this might be a good fit for you. So what happens is it sets up. Now, the only thing that kind of is a little bit wonky with the layout here is you'll notice in this little box, I think typically if I was reading through official WotC stuff, what's in the box is typically what you'll read to your players. That's not the case here. You're reading to your players these italicized type of things. What's in the box is sort of the behind the scenes information for the Dungeon Master. So I think maybe if there was a sort of version 2 that was to come out, Laura, maybe switch that a little bit, because I may be wrong, but I think a lot of times what's in these boxes is sort of the read this to your player sorts of stuff. It may be out of focus here, but yeah, kind of confirming. I'm looking through Curse of Strahd, and you do have that situation where one must die. If any character climbs to the top of the dais, read. And then it has that exact box, right, with the dots and the lines and all this other stuff. And what's within the box is what you should read. So the layout here is a little bit, I had to kind of navigate my way through it. I think any DM should go through the content ahead of time anyway. If you're planning on running an adventure or a module, you want to read through the scope of this thing or the entirety of this first. That is the only real slight against this entire thing. Everything else is really well done. I really enjoy it. I like it a lot. What happens here is dark clouds appear from nowhere, and basically the essence of it is the ship capsizes. It crashes against the island, basically shipwrecking the group. So it kind of throws you right into it, and it forces you there. One thing I like about that, when you have 11 pages, you're trying to have this concise and efficient content of saying, here's the story, here's the adventure, let's jump into it. And when it does something like this, I like that because it doesn't leave a lot of room for the PCs to kind of negotiate with the crew and, all this extra downtime and behind the scenes navigational stuff on whether they want to go and who, it just throws you right into the thick of it very quickly. You land on this island, there's nowhere else to go other than into this sort of building, this structure that's there, which is kind of the haunted building, the haunted structure. The thing that people have said they've seen exists out there. And here we get into the lonely house. So shipwrecked. Here, as I said, you have italicized. This is what you read to the players. Waking up and coughing up seawater, your face and limbs sting from being scraped against a rocky surface. Looking up, there is no ship, no other boats, only this small rock. You're stuck here. Go through this, figure it out. Balanced on top is a cottage. One part of the foundations have sunk into the water. Your clothes are slick and soaked, cold and clinging to the skin. Your feet slide on the algae slick surface as you make your way up to a small wooden door. So right here we get into, that's what you read to the players, and then you've got all the behind the scenes stuff of, what sort of saving throws they need, what skill rolls they're going to make, so on and so forth. As I said, you've got the accompanying maps that you can download, and it's well drawn. I like it. It's nice and simple, but there's enough little landmarks and structural points within the artwork that are brought about. Like when you investigate the inside of this hallway, you'll notice there's a table. You'll notice there are paintings and a suit of armor in the corner. Those little details are on the map. So that's a really nice touch, and it's very simple. It's easy to navigate your way through that. So you'll kind of just digest this ahead of time. I strongly recommend, especially with it not, with this not being 400 pages you have to delve into, just read through this stuff ahead of time to know and be able to fly right off the cuff when your PC start asking questions of what do I see, what do I do, what can I do, and so on and so forth. So there's just a lot of good bullet points here that indicate the points of interest within the room. So really clear, really concise, and really interesting. And then once we've wrangled in that the kind of the layout is a little bit reversed from what you'd normally find, we know that when you read the stuff in this box, that's not to the players. This is behind the scenes info, as you can see. The doors to the kitchen and bedroom have a spatial distortion. As you start going through, basically what happens is you're stuck in this specific hallway, because as you try and go through the kitchen door or later on go into the bedroom door without solving the riddle, the puzzle of this place, you're going to keep getting teleported back to the entrance. So the PCs have to start to wrangle their way through this in a puzzle sort of sense. And that is where the excellence and the beauty of this whole thing really shines through. Is everything is based on a lot of investigation. Notice we haven't gotten into any combat. It's a lot of investigative work, and I like that the PCs, the players themselves at the table, are having to think through this stuff, and the PCs are getting to use their skills, whether they've got really good, investigative checks, or they're really good in history, and they might be able to, learn about some additional information that can help them in the investigation. The essence of everything that's here is this is a ghost thing. The big threat at the end is an actual undead entity, a ghost. And I love the treatment of how that ghost was handled as to how do you kill it, and does it keep forming and reforming, and what are its hit points, that type of thing. And I'll talk through that in just a moment. But even though it's not a direct roll initiative encounter in the beginning, the moment you enter into this cottage, into this structure, you feel the presence of that ghost. And that's brought about by this telekinetic effect where the ghost just keeps as you would see in any horror movie, the ghost keeps throwing these various objects that are in the room. So you have an easel and canvas, you have brushes, you have paints, you have a writing desk, you have a wine cabinet. So you're going to get glasses flung at the PCs. You're going to get, the paper flying around the room. You're going to get, various mugs and buckets, and the canvas itself might fly and hit the group. It says right here, the writing desk might slide into the PCs. An armchair will float up and hurtle towards them. These are things that are dealing damage. And yes, they can make dex saving throws, but they're taking bludgeoning damage from these objects in a ghostly sense that are just flying about the room being hit. And there's nothing the PCs can do about it, right? There's no threat that they can remove right away, other than tying down the stuff, of course. There's no threat they can remove that's doing this. So I like that it kind of puts this sense of intensity and this sense of drama and dread and tension, because the PCs are kind of on a timer, right? The longer they sort of linger in here, the more these things just keep getting thrown around the room, damaging the PCs, and they can't really stop that threat. Combine that with the fact that trying to go through any of the other doors just keeps teleporting them back to the entrance. It clearly indicates that the group needs to figure out something here, and that's where the investigation comes in. And I love that it presents, as it says here, in order to proceed, the party must unlock all 5 sections of a story. They basically need to repair or reset items of furniture in the room, which will trigger some really cool story elements. So as these various objects are hitting them, the instinct is these things are hurting us. How do we stop it? Look around. Is there some invisible entity or some ghost that's right here in the room with us that's causing these effects? Once they realize that's not the case, because the ghost is further on along in the dungeon or in the adventure map, they realize, okay, maybe we need to do something with these objects. And as they start to piece these things together, the other really, really awesome part is it says right here, here's some examples of some things that the PCs might be able to do to start unraveling the story, to start delving deeper into this, discovering the puzzle. I also like that it says players might come up with some interesting solutions. Use your own discretion to keep it flexible. That sentence right there is something that all folk, creative individuals, especially DMs, right? People that are making their own things, using this as inspiration to make your own puzzle. Adhere to that, because what happens is, and I read this somewhere else a long time ago, and I use this all the time. When you create a puzzle, when you create a situation like this, right? They're on a timer. They're repeatedly getting damaged by objects, and it's up to the PCs, or I should say the players, to figure out what the riddle is. The frustration can come about when the PCs don't have let's say the players don't latch onto anything and they're not sure if they're going down the right path. If the PCs go down a path that's not written, because remember, you as the DM, you know the answers, you know the pieces that need to be put into place, you know the riddle. If the PCs don't go down that path, what happens? Do they just keep getting pummeled by these various objects endlessly until they're dead? But if the PCs go down a path that wasn't in writing, that's not set in bullet points here, run with it. Give them the hope that maybe they're doing the right thing. And I love that it mentions that players might come up with some interesting solutions. Stuff that is not written, stuff that was not thought of by the Dungeon Master. But if they do, and they get excited about that and there's some hope, run with that and now make that a part of the solution. That's a very important thing in all puzzles. When the PCs are all going along a certain track that is not written, that is not a part of the puzzle that you put up with, that's not a part of the solution, I should say, add that into the solution. Make that now the new way that they're going to discover all the things they need. And by combining that and the various examples of maybe playing the piano, you have to reorganize the sheet music and put it back, basically tidy up the place. When you do that, what it does on the next page is it unveils these certain parts. Like once they have resolved an item in the room, they'll be fixed in place and will no longer damage the players. This will show a shimmering semi-translucent overlay of what the room was once like. So it's almost like you get that hologram, right? Or that hallucination where you see Blizzard and World of Warcraft does this a lot in a lot of their story-based quests, where you get to see the ghostly images of the things that happen as a result of this. And once you get one part, it registers in your mind for the player of here's the type of things we need to do. And it really gets them in this investigative role. It's just very well done. The pieces all fit together. You're unraveling a story. There's a lot of lore and good bits of detail here. So it's just fascinating, and it's really, really well done. And as you do that, you start to unlock all 5 pieces, all 5 parts, which allows you entrance into the bedroom, which gives you more investigative things. That's where you find this doll, kind of the creepy horror element of that, which is kind of the first encounter of the Emily doll. That's an actual roll initiative, right? You can get into the kitchen. It has little things like being able to have salt that you can find in the kitchen, which makes sense. But if someone makes a history check, you remember that ghosts can't pass through lines of salt. So there's a lot of really neat bits there that in investigative and deductive and intrigue work can help you in actual combat encounters. And then eventually you discover that the house, as it was indicated from the outside, is sort of half sunken, and you kind of swim through some parts and you get into like a cellar, which finds more things, and it finds some hints of a final ritual. And then you go into this cavernous system and some hidden rooms. And finally in the cavern, you meet Lilith, the CR4 undead herself. And to sort of finish the entire thing, to get through this encounter, because the other interesting part that I said I would mention here is it says restless. Lilith has no hit points, but whenever she takes 20 damage, she basically appears defeated. Her form sort of unravels and disappears, but then she reforms, and that keeps going. So I like the take on this not just being kind of a meat shield. The way you kind of encounter or overcome this encounter is eventually you have to complete the ritual, which indicates here that each round a party member can read one line of it, so on and so forth. And by doing that, that's how you truly put this undead to rest. So again, it kind of puts this encounter on a timer, because it forces the PCs to have to come up with a solution, because you realize that every time we damage her, she sort of dies, but she reforms again, and it just keeps coming back. And I think the strength of meshing those two together, the investigative parts and how much that ties into figuring out what you need to do to overcome the actual combat encounters, creates a really cool adventure here for $5. And I like the overall tension and that timer element, and the fact that there's things happening, some threats here, but you need to kind of think outside the box and really think through intellectually how to handle these encounters. Otherwise, you're just going to die from this stuff. It really lends itself to that horror, ghostly element. And it does a really good job of giving an epilogue and some sort of wrap up where you can maybe tie some things into how this fits into your world and your story. So there it is. I'm really happy with it. It's really good. Thank you again, Laura, for sending this to me. I think you guys should check it out. As I said, I'll put a link in the description. But that is what you have in this 11-page adventure, Back to the Sea, made for 3 to 5 players, levels 3 to 4. Thanks, everyone, and take care.